the gym. My eyes move the sun, wondering if they swing or run. Until the line, 10,000 stars are gonna die.
You are listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. So, hello from the aftermath of the Buffalo Blizzard of 2022. That was not a fun experience. I was without power for around 40 hours in my house, and things got pretty bleak over here with regards to possible carbon monoxide poisoning, smoke from my fireplace filling my entire house, and having a dead cell phone battery and no way really to contact the outside world. And even if I had been able to contact anybody, emergency services in the entire city and region were not responding to emergency calls. So to say I am thankful to be alive right now talking to you on this podcast is an understatement. So let's get to the episode. On this episode, my guest, Michael Whiteside, and I are discussing March of the Crabs, track 13 on Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes. And just to kick this off with some information about this track, you can find a full 2.5-hour conversation with Chris, Todd, and Jord on Chris's Patreon channel at patreon.com/JesusHChris. That conversation on Chris's Patreon was released on December 25th, 2020, and goes into a deep examination of Todd joining the band, the story behind Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes, and the perspective behind the story and creation of this tune. The entire backstory told by the people who made the record and this song in the first place is essential listening for all of you propaganda fanatics out there. And the listener comments section on that episode in Patreon is also really great and worth re-examining. So Chris talks about the history of demoing for Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes, but was unsuccessful in finding a complete demo of what the song sounded like before recording, how the song was sort of an amalgamation of riffs from other songs, and the history of what the members of the band can remember. And then they speculate on the origin of the dual vocalist approach to March of the Crabs that appears elsewhere around Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes. Then Todd explains the song is all a few meanings sort of twisting into one, which Michael, my guest on this episode, and I will kind of dive into from our perspectives as well. So Todd talks about the memory he has of a fight during his elementary school years between a few groups of kids in Regina, Saskatchewan, his hometown, and Todd remembers the crowd and recounts his memories about the song, and it's just a great fun of reminiscing between the band, hearing Todd tell the story of March of the Crabs. So the episode is a fun conversation between pals and the actual meaning of the song explained by the band. And they really start diving into the meaning of the song at around 55 minutes into that March of the Crabs episode on Patreon. So if you're looking to revisit that episode, I definitely recommend it. I went back and listened to it again recently, and I really enjoyed it. So a fun note as well that I was kind of digging into is that the band Anvil also has an instrumental song called March the Crabs, which is very fun. So if you're looking for another song called March the Crabs, go find Anvil's instrumental. So let's get into my episode with Michael. So Michael Whiteside contributed an extreme grindcore style of cover of March of the Crabs, and then he joined me for a chat to discuss the song. I didn't know that Michael was trying to submit videos to try out for propaganda before Sue Lin joined, so that was a fun little discovery during this episode. But Michael is a really interesting and enjoyable conversation partner for this song because he is a music writer and deputy editor at the music website Fecking Bahamas, an online math rock music magazine. And the mission of Fecking Bahamas attempts to connect global math rock communities and provide equal exposure to international math rock bands. So it's really great to hear Michael's thoughts on music journalism, his analysis of this song, the story behind creating his grindcore cover of March the Crabs, and much more. So We will kick off this episode with Michael's cover, and then we will jump right into the conversation. Enjoy.
Here's a song that hasn't been played in about 15 years.
Michael Whiteside, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm delighted to have you here, Michael. I'm wondering if you can just spend a moment and introduce yourself a little bit to the listeners out there so they know a little bit about who you are.
Sure. Yeah. I am Michael Whiteside. I am the editor-in-chief currently of a website you might have heard of called Fecking Bahamas. We do a lot of coverage for the weirder side of rock, mainly being math rock, prog, offshoots of indie, jazz, electronic stuff. Cover a lot of obscure stuff, but a lot of it is very punk adjacent, being that math is often described as kind of the bastard child of jazz and punk and emo and a few other subgenres depending on who you ask. But yeah, I guess mainly my obsession with Propagandhi comes from that is like really loving technical music. But yeah, before we get super into my being a fan of the band, I also play in a band called Child Speak and a band called Muscle Beach Petting Zoo. Muscle Beach Petting Zoo was started after I started practicing to try to replace Beeve when Propagandhi put the call out.
Nice, cool.
Yeah, when I was done, I think learning Failed States and like 5 other songs, I realized, wow, I'd never practiced so much in my life. And
wow.
And how much I would need to continue to practice. And luckily, it just caught the attention of a couple people locally, and they were like, "Do you want to play in a band?" Instead of like, impossibly make a quantum leap like that. And it ended up working out. And that was my first experience being in like a really intense band. And yeah, I don't know. Our early stuff was definitely Propagandhi inspired, particularly because we had a drummer that played in a band called Manitoba Lights, and not a part of it. Very, very sort of central Canada punk inspired. Lots of lore in there. Anyway,
that's super cool. Did you go through like the video filming process and like submitting the material to them when you were doing that tryout process?
Yeah, I think I did Coach's Corner. But that wasn't one that they had asked for. And I had already set up this thing in my mind where I was like, I don't know why I did that. Like I should have sent in something that they asked for, because I had even practiced those songs, but I didn't think I was maybe as polished on Failed States. But Failed States was much tougher than I thought it was going to be.
Amazing. What are so I didn't know that you do a lot of like music writing and specifically within like mathy music. That's really cool. I'm wondering if you have any, suggestions out there for what's really exciting you in music right now. Cause I'm always looking for new stuff, especially because like the podcast, the format that we've done here has changed a lot the last like several months. And so I'm kind of finding myself re-emerging into being a fan of music, like far beyond Propagandhi for the first time in quite some time. Doing a show like this, you get so immersed in the minutia that you kind of forget that a lot of other music exists in the world. So if you have any suggestions, it's stuff that you're really pumped on right now, I'd love to hear it.
I do actually. Here, give me like 3 seconds here. I've been compiling a list of some of the better stuff from this year.
Nice.
That's been normally we do a top 25, but this year there was literally so much stuff that I couldn't keep it to that. We're doing a top 50 this year.
Nice.
So I'm gonna try to pick a couple that I think are at least somewhat adjacent to like punk and rock. So like, you're not too far out there, but I'll throw a couple out of left field as well. One I think you might really dig is Fox Lake.
Okay.
I don't remember where they're from, but it is north of me. It's definitely from Canada somewhere. They are on Coup Records, and Max, who runs that label, knows a couple of the guys in Propagandhi. So Fox Lake is definitely one, very melodic, but they throw in a lot of not necessarily random, but it's complex for that kind of stuff. False Pockets was another weird one that was very surprising for me. They're from New York. I hope they're from New York. I'm pretty sure they're from New York. And that was like an early one in the year, but I knew like February or March when it came out that was going to be one on my list. Obviously, you probably know a Wilhelm Scream released a record this year.
Yeah, it's great too. I love it.
Yeah, it was super cool. It was kind of like a mix of what I thought was going to happen ultimately. Like, these guys they have to mellow out at some point. They have to, Zeke is good. The singer's gonna burst a blood vessel.
Yeah,
if he does
Trevor
it.
sings a lot now too. Trevor's singing a lot more on this record.
Yeah, and I dug that was. I wonder if maybe that is related. Maybe he's like, dude, you could sing a little more on this one, save me some trouble.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed that because they still kept up the kind of their first couple records were very evocative. I'm not sure how to describe it, but Party Crasher and the one of the EPs, I was like, this is still really good, but I think that they are tired of shit. Like, I would be really tired. And this sounds like they have taken this sufficient breather and like really coming back with some more meaningful stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree. This one was really fresh to me. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, and especially with those vocals going back and forth, that was really tight. A more angry one that you might enjoy, something that you might have heard of already, is Chat Pile.
Oh, cool. No, I don't know them.
Oh Lord. Okay. Chat Pile is not for the faint of heart. A lot of waves came from them this year because they released an album called God's Country, and it's such a harrowing and poetic Frankenstein take. Like it's really like if Frankenstein fronted a sort of a post-punk sludge band. It's really scary and the lyrics are really intense. But that one's, I think anyone could check it out once and get something really intense from it.
Very good.
Yeah. But let me just throw a few more out there. I'll try not to get super into the weeds. A few more really good ones are God Alone. They're from Ireland. The Pieces of Shit.
Okay.
I really enjoyed them. That was unexpected. I really enjoyed them. And if you're looking for something really mathy, Teen Prime came out. They're from Germany. I think they're from Berlin. Teen Prime released something that's really confusing, and I really love it. And then what's that one that I just was it's so hard to pronounce. I'll get back to you on that one. I literally just did the review and I feel like I'm butchering it. But they are kind of a super group. They have Trevor Dunn from Mr. Bungle in them.
Oh,
currently.
cool.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up the article so I don't ruin it. And the guy from a band called Terms, and Terms is part of the band from Yowie, or formerly of Yowie, a very intense math rock band. That band that I was trying to murder their name was Ahleuchatistas. Chatistas, Ahleuchatistas.
Nice.
They're from North Carolina. No right having such a confusing name.
I love it. Well, they probably don't really care a whole heck of a lot about finding a ton of listeners. That they're like, you know what? I don't even care. Well, I'm this age now. I've been making music this many years. I'm just going to do whatever I want, and this includes having a crazy unpronounceable name for the new people to try and figure out.
That's fair. That's so embarrassing.
Thanks, how did
guys.
So have you always kind of been into pretty wild music, all the way back? Because I've been, fairly consistent in my preference for fairly wild music since I can remember,
Yes. This might be somewhat of a common thread, but I, like many people that are just about entering their 30s or in their early 30s, I was struck like a truck hitting me in traffic by the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater soundtracks.
Yeah.
And those songs and that attitude and that energy was such a contrast from what was generally allowed, being that my parents were opera singers and very classically trained, very classically aware, and honestly tried to keep me away from that stuff. So when the gates were broken and I got to hear all that stuff on my own all the time, I changed overnight. I was just like, this is what I've been looking for. I feel like I've always had not necessarily struggled with, but like coming to terms with the fact that I've always had ADHD or something very. I just have so many thoughts all the time, and it's always like trying to reach back into the past and remember what was I just thinking about, and it's really annoying. But punk rock is always on that speed. They're always very in the moment, and it's always a therapeutic experience listening to punk rock for me, both in terms of like getting to experience similar politics and views on the world, and then also just having something that really matches your heartbeat, your BPM in life.
Yeah. Did you where does Propaganda come in? Where does that door open for you with the band?
I was a big Fat Records kid. I was probably 12 or 13 when my sister got me like 2 or 3 new NoFX records. And when I went on the website, I think there was still a listing for, I want to say, I don't think it was Today's Empires. I think it was like the Let's Talk More Rock or Potemkin City Limits. It was not one that I expected, but I didn't check it out. I just was aware of the name all of a sudden around 12 or 13. But maybe other people say this too. I got super into prog metal in college and was into Protest the Hero.
Oh yeah.
And they name dropped Propaganda so consistently. I was like, I should probably go back and check them out. And one at a time, like literally like 1 year at a time, I would become obsessed with their records retroactively. I think when Failed States was coming out is right about the time that I was like, oh shit, Propaganda is coming out with a new record. Let's catch up. What were they doing? And I checked out, first it was the not Failed States, the supporting cast record.
Mm-hmm.
That was huge for me, and I learned most of those songs on guitar. I thought that everything about it was something that I had been looking for in punk rock. There was a lot more heart to it, a lot more ethos and commitment to itself, to its own narrative. It didn't seem so performative, even though it is very literal. There was something about it that was as heartfelt as it was literal, and that's a hard balance to strike. And that really attracted to me. And then like the next year, because it took me a while for Failed States to sink in. So the next year I got super into Today's Empires and all their other stuff. It's been every year I've kind of had like a different record that I'll obsess over. But yeah, that probably started around 2012 when that was coming out. That kind of backwards and forwards nonlinear obsession.
Yeah, it was a weird experience for me because I knew right away in 2009 that Supporting Cast was probably an untoppable record for me. Like I knew right away, I was like, this is the one for me for sure. And so when Failed States came out, I had a hard time letting go of how perfect I thought that Supporting Cast was. So it took me a long time to be able to fully appreciate Failed States for what it was, because I was so obsessed with like living in the past. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I mean, they sort of do a, it's hard to explain. I was thinking about this a lot today too, where it's not like they repeat themselves, but they'll have records nowadays, like in the last 10 years, that reflect, I think, similar epiphanies and directions from their past. And like there's some parallels, I think, between Failed States and Less Talk More Rock, where it's even more uncompromising than normal, to the point where it doesn't fit the normal narrative of Propaganda to a slight degree, not in like an upsetting way, but I was just like, there's songs about things I didn't expect. There are a lot of dramatic left turns that almost seem like they're just kind of in an open experimental stage, and that does take a while to appreciate, and I'm glad that listeners do appreciate it, because it is an awesome album. But they were going through, I think, a relatively dark mental headspace. If the lyrics on that album, the theme of that album, it's dark. And
Yeah.
so has the stuff in the past, but that, failed states, I think it's just one of the more literal descriptions, and it shows
Yeah.
throughout.
Well, at the very beginning of this episode, folks out there listening heard your cover that you made for this episode. So we've got March the Crabs from Potemkin City Limits. Just kidding.
Oh man, I wish.
From today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes. And just in general, today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes has a lot of uniqueness within the catalog itself. Things that are unique to just that record as far as propaganda goes. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes as a whole. What makes that record special for you, and kind of like what's important about that record in your view?
Dude, it's that's one of those records that I think is there's that stupid NoFX song where it says it's where he's talking about getting a copy of this record and putting it on the wall next to like Battle of Los Angeles. And honestly, I respect and I feel that lyric so much, because the way that this album approaches the narrative in a more storytelling manner that's more consistent is so incredibly effective. And it's really personal to me, because like when I moved from California to Utah in 2005, the lyrics were like literally the story of going to high school, dickhead shit talk. I was like looking around, I was like, oh my God, man, this is kind of a hell of just white utopia madness. All these, it's very religious, very tight-knit communities in that respect. I was coming to them from a very outsider perspective, if not just kind of deviant. I did not fit in at all, and that record wasn't something that I found at the time that I wish I did, but when I finally did, it was very healing, to look back on this kind of like landmark mental growth spurt, I think, for the band, and for me too, to feel understood and to feel represented in that way, or at least stimulated, was so special. And it still is every time I listen to it. And I'm out here again working on a film, and it's as relevant as it's ever been, if not more. And yeah, the lyrics they definitely represent sort of a shift from the, again, more of the literal stuff from earlier into the storytelling, which I think is a really powerful vehicle for that stuff. And yeah, like we kind of talked about for a second earlier, that there's a lot of weird musical spontaneity that's just like boom everywhere. The beginning of March of the Crabs does like 3 or 4 different things before it starts. There's a lot of songs that are like a minute long that are super prog thrashy and are just gone before you know it. But they're all effective, even like on the remaster that came out, when they took out all the samples and stuff, it actually it almost improved the record for me. But I love both versions.
Right. I feel exactly the same. Like, I love that this one just gets me straight into the middle of the action on every single song. Now there's no waiting around.
Yeah. And I mean, the intro to today's Empires, that first song, that first sample is incredible. Like, that was, I think when I first put that on, I couldn't believe that they were choosing to use samples at first. I was like, because I was used to that happening in a totally different context, like in an ironic sense.
Sure.
And this was so not that. It was really, it gets you when she says, thousands of people have been killed for singing this song. You're like, how can that be? And like before the song even starts, you're like on this trip in your head already. So I thought that was really genius of them to do. And the fact that record initially shipped with the FBI documentary and the one about the Black Panthers and all that, I don't know. I have so much respect for the band using their platform as a vehicle for education in that respect.
Nice. So you did March the Crabs at kind of like a grindcore version of it, for lack of a better word. I don't really
Yeah, I know. What do you say? It's like
exactly.
it's
Uh,
heavier.
I'm definitely curious about your process. First of all, like, so why did you choose March of the Crabs? And tell me the story behind creating the cover that you did for the episode.
Yeah. So I mean, originally I wanted to do Without Love, and then like the second that I committed to that, that guy released an amazing cover of it in a very similar style that I was thinking of, and it was like, do you just not do it? And then I was looking at the tracks that no one had done yet, and that one just stood out to me because it had been one that would randomly be repeating in my head after I'd released the album, and I was like, that song just doesn't get the respect it deserves. But then, that's not necessarily true. Chris did that really cool playthrough for the re-release, and that
Mm-hmm.
taught me quite a bit over the last couple of weeks when I was kind of analyzing how I'd approach things either differently or similarly. uh, Chris does this amazing stuff with the guitar that's like very influenced in terms of like the chord structures from prog and metal, from whatever, all the ones that he wears on his sleeve. I think that his use of like the inverted chords really taught me a lot over the last few weeks. I tend to use more of the classic power chord, fifths, interval kind of a thing, and he uses a lot of like fourths and inverted things that like are chords technically, but it makes it easier for him to reach for the lead that's happening half a second later. And I have never really seen anyone do it like he does. And then to think of him singing all this shit on top of it is just incredible. So it's inspirational on a technical level. Again, it has a lot of signature elements of like just Jordy throwing in like 5 drum fills randomly, and then we're going into a different key. I love the spontaneity ultimately. So I think that it's just yeah, it's a great example of Jordy's moves, of the band's a lot of things that would become like very signature to the band, even if they were experimenting with it on the whole record. March of the Crabs is a very concentrated dose.
What do you think about the ping-ponging vocals on this tune? Because this is one of the best examples that they've ever done where Chris and Todd share it pretty
Mm-hmm.
nicely. And I love that this record has so much of that. And I'm curious about your thoughts on the back and forths.
Yeah, I mean, I think from what I understand at the time, I think everyone was really keeping that under a microscope, right? Because wasn't this like Todd's first foray into that with the band?
Yeah.
Um, that is really special. I don't know if I read this correctly. I think somewhere, isn't Todd kind of responsible for the narrative of this
Yeah,
song?
this is a Todd song. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, he writes lyrics and writes vocal lines in such a cathartic way, very similar to Chris. Like it's a miracle that those two work together. I love their interplay, and this is definitely one of the most effective songs, I guess, if you want to get to know like what's the highest dynamic that they approach together. This is a great example of something like that. And they're like kind of trade off of like shouting versus melodic is interesting on this one too. Todd's a vocal monster. Even after he had to change his style up a little bit, I still consider him to be very effective at what he does. But this is like one of those cases of just a young man thrashing his heart out. Two of them really.
Yeah. So I like the plot that we've got in the lyrics here. But actually, before we get into that, tell me the story about you making this song, because
Oh,
we
sure.
forgot to go into that.
Sure, yeah. I have been really obsessed with heavy music in the background as much as I love like technical math rock, prog, and all that. I love music in general, but I don't really have an outlet for heavy stuff. And it's something that I really grew up using to practice. So there's a lot kind of just sitting there in terms of mechanics and technicality that I wish I could apply, whether it be on drums or guitar. And recently it just kind of came to a head. It's really frustrating being stuck out here in the desert with nothing to do. My bands and all that are based in Oregon, where I would like to go back to as soon as possible. Anyway, I have a lot of music that I'm just kind of sitting on, and I'm getting better and better at like just programming with stock programs in Logic and putting other programs to good use. And I had set up a template recently from a submission to the Cyberpunk 2077 contest for their soundtrack. And it's also very kind of grindcore. There's some more electronic elements in that one, but I had a template from that project, and I had just decided, I'm not going to cover Without Love. Let's see if we can just throw March of the Crabs into an even higher dynamic using this template that I have from the Cyberpunk project. And it was really fun because I already had these like aggressive guitars set up, but I used a couple of the guitar chains for my vocals, just to nail a kind of like Deaf Heaven reverberated gross high-end thing. And those are things that I would like to do better. But, a funny part of me covering this song is, I tell my spouse, hey, I got to move the speakers around. I need to mix some more. And as soon as I make this move, I break my headphone adapter off into my monitors.
Oh boy.
Killing my headphones and my monitors in a split second. And I tried for days to take you take a Bic pen, you unscrew it, and you put some super glue on it. It's the perfect diameter for the end of the headphone jack, and you just stick it on there. You try to wait as long as you can and pull it out, pray that it'll stick on there. Mine didn't, so I had to mix this in an entirely different context. So it's a little less polished than I'd like it to be, but this cover will always remind me of having to adapt very quickly. Much like a crab.
Nice. How was the vocal process? Like, how did that feel doing sounds that come out of your face that sound like the way that they do? Because this is, it seems like hard work on this one.
You know what? I would like to say that it is. I have a lot of friends that just make stupid, crazy voices all the time. And we're not afraid to embarrass ourselves. And it really comes from a place of emptying for me at least, you got to empty your expectations of expectations. Like people, yes, if people don't have a context for what is happening in that room, they might call the police. It doesn't sound, especially if you're not in a professional studio, it doesn't sound good.
Yeah.
But there's something very cathartic about approaching that high end. I'm very influenced by bands like, these are not related bands, but a band like Black Dahlia Murder or Gridlink. Both of those vocalists have very unique high ends that I find just really appealing. And I like to mess around with like guttural lower stuff too. And I tried to throw some of that into this cover, but it never called for it. It's such the general frequency of the song pulls upwards. There wasn't a lot of demand for the lows. At least if I had sat long enough with it, maybe I would have thrown more in it. But I wanted to kind of nail down vocally the same sort of tone of the original, but I wanted it to be sort of radioactive. I wanted it to be post that, the era that record came out in was visceral enough. There, we had all these things happening that I think inspired the emotion and the energy of those takes. You know, there was so much crazy shit happening on, or sorry, so much crazy shit happening in the world that it was probably, I wasn't quite aware of it, you know, being a young person, but to be their age at that time must have been really insane. Maybe not too much different than how it feels now in some respects, but um, now some of those aspects are probably toxic and rotted over. There's all of these things that have gotten much worse, and I wanted to reflect that vocally. So I want to kind of throw in this, not necessarily a supernatural, but just like a very over the top
Yeah.
thing.
Sometimes I often wonder if my neighbors can hear me. Like, 'cause sometimes I do like these like vocal covers over the top of like the 8-bit songs and stuff like that, just as a joke to put like in the end of episodes. And I'm always like, I wonder if my next door neighbors can hear me, because I'm literally standing like my computer desk here is like right on the outer wall of my house. So it's like my neighbor's house is like 10 feet away. And I'm like, there's no way they can't hear me at least a little bit sometimes. It's, you know, I always wonder about that, but you got to do what you got to do, you know?
Yeah, this is important work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this song, the lyrics are really interesting to me because to me, it's got three parts, right? We've got this, we stood our ground part. So it's kind of got this like Lord of the Flies opening where it's just like that you're just picturing these like hordes of young people standing face to face like in like a municipal park or something, like facing off. Like one group's friend insulted somebody on the other group's friend, and they said, I'm gonna get all my buddies and we're gonna go together. And it's like these like groups of sixth graders that like are mad at each other, but they don't really know what to do. So they're like, we're going to meet you and we're going to fight you. So they get all their group together and they got to go and they got to back each other up, but really no one wants to be there. And they don't really know what they're supposed to do when they get there, but it feels really important when they're getting their group together to go to the meeting spot. Do you have any like thoughts on this opening scene where all the kids are together in the first, like, about 40% of the lyrics here?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the Lord of the Flies parallel is definitely pretty apt. I hadn't thought about it quite like that. The line "jackknives and socks, no lie, they're gonna die." That really gets me because that speaks to all the stuff you just said, where the kids do not want to be there, but out of their mouths are coming like these very real threats, these things that have real world consequences. This is so dumb, but like this reminds me of like a video I saw a few years ago from Vice on the drill phenomenon in London and how aggressive rap was become not necessarily a problem, but it's reaching younger and younger ages, and it still has all this mature content, you could argue. And so when you have like a 9-year-old rapping about like, I'm gonna rape your sister, all of a sudden like boop, all those red flags go off, right? It can't be that this 9-year-old really feels that way, right? I mean, maybe it is true, but like all of a sudden you have these high and mature themes coming from kids that aren't ready for that shit. And I think that, again, that jackknives and socks, they're gonna die is such a visceral a description of that feeling. You're all heated, you're ready to go, like you said, but it's a really scary situation. I think I've only been in a couple situations like rumbles like that. But you hide under the lunch table like a sensible human being. Or get sliced, I don't know.
Like even if they're a small group of people, they are mighty in this scene. You know what I mean? It's really pretty funny. But then it switches, right? To me, the switch happens at who am I fighting a war that I can't win, swelling with things we try to hide. To me, it's like acknowledging, it's going from being the child group of like being in this like rumble, and then all of a sudden it's like flash forward and you're an adult and it's years later And the war is like life and the feelings of insignificance and swelling with things we try to hide. It's like you push deep down your insecurities and you're like just trying to take one day at a time. But then there's also this like stuff that comes in here with you never leave anyone behind, a harsh return that slaps you in the face. And to me, that's like about trying to keep the others around you going also. It's like you're trying to be a supportive presence in other people's lives around you. But the slap in the face is like, regardless if they want you to or not, you can't drag other people along forever. And then it kind of like bites you in the butt. But, that to me, it's like, who can't relate to these lines? Like, I've got a war in the head, fear our lives won't pass as great events. Like, it's worrying that as you get older and older, that your life won't add up to the promises that you were told or that you thought that you could accomplish whenever you were young. And then we've been crushed beyond oblivion. This is a recurring thing for Todd too, because like to me, he refers to this like crushing in Negretto on Victory Lap.
Oh,
like,
wow.
15 years later, like the waves swallow you up, the person comes up for air and then they go down forever.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. So to me, there's this whole entire adulthood section is a very recurring common thing for Todd. So I love the flash forward adult section here in the middle of it after the whole entire Rumble scene in the beginning.
It's weird because it's like a moment of doubt that snowballs. It's like, I think that the little evolution, like the way those lyrics progress is, I think it's pretty intentional. Todd can sometimes throw some poetic, almost haiku-esque things at you, where they're not necessarily it's not necessarily a sentence,
right?
More poetic, but this one is very from the heart for sure. And
yeah,
I think that like you said, it is kind of like that flash forward of like, maybe the kid has just got the thought that he is probably going to go home and eat dinner, but
yeah.
when he has that thought, it's like the crushing guilt that starts to snowball after. They're like, God, why do I keep doing this? Am I going to keep doing this my whole life? I can see my parents doing this. There's that line, the drinking don't, the boredom don't. It's like, oh shit, that guy, he gets it. That, to me, that's almost like the parent at home waiting for it all to like just keep going.
Yeah.
But also himself in the future, not necessarily Todd, but this character.
Yeah. Well, and then there's got like the graves and memorial walls hold my family name, pills and bottles do the same. So it's like this section's like in that adulthood years where, there's this alluding to issues of addiction as well, and like watching the other people around you just struggle so much just to go from day to day, and then seeing those same people die. And then what remains is like their names on this wall. And you're like, man, am I going to be the same? Is this going to happen to me too? And then you constantly are like doubting that you can like keep yourself together for an entire lifetime as well. Whenever it's like, you've seen the other people around you who were like your role models, kind of like crashing and burning left and right. It kind of makes you feel doubt that you can actually ever rise above and be beyond that,
Yeah. And I mean, it's such a working class feeling, like that's such a relatable moment, especially I think in the last 20 years, as I think maybe when this song came out, the image of bottles and pills might have been slightly different than how a kid might hear that today. It's very literal. Not that prescriptions weren't around, but prescriptions are so commonplace now, and the idea of medicating your mental health through these pharmaceutical companies and medicating yourself with alcohol and anything else, it's like that's a very real part of the working class mentality, and it's for better or for worse. And I think that's just an incredible capture of that.
Yeah. To me, the ending of the adult section is, I hope that freedom's coming our way. Like, even if you're, doubting, year after year that you're actually doing better with each passing year, it's like clinging to this hope that maybe next year is our year. You know what I mean? Like this always
Sure.
happens this time of year too, where it's like the end of a year is upon us right now. And there's a lot of people out there who are like, man, I really hope 2023 is better than 2022. And I'm just like, and it really, it hurts, you know, because you have to keep hoping in some way, even though, it's really hard to make actual sustained changes to change things in your life that aren't great, you know?
Of course. No, that's, yeah. I mean, and I think as you become an adult, you know, that I don't think this song had anything to do with New Year's resolutions, but I'm starting to see it's perfect timing. Because yeah, that is kind of like a theme, you know, with your resolutions. A lot of the time you're like, I guess I am gonna eat ice cream.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
am gonna dig in here a little bit. But I like that. I hope that freedom comes our way line, because to me it sort of highlights the, how do you say this? Like it's sort of the planned contention between two sides, almost like the overlords, you know, like the way that a left someone on the left and someone on the right might be manipulated by the same person. I hope that freedom comes our way, to me, could refer to, like, you know, more of a meta thing where they're like, I hope I don't have to do this at some point. I
Yeah.
hope I don't have to either slave away or pretend I am angry at a stranger on the street, you know. To be free of either of those tensions would be dope.
Yeah. Well, and then it switches back. It goes back to the children, right? The fight never happened. The crowd petered out. We all dribbled home. Mission accomplished. It's this kind of interesting way, if you think about like the grand scheme of life, how so much of adulthood is so anticlimactic. Like you grow up and you're like, oh, when I grow up, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this. But then you get to adulthood and it's like, this is it. And so it kind of has the same anticlimactic feeling about being an adult as you see in the end of the fight scene that concludes the song. It's really kind of hilarious when you think about it. Like how many times when you were a kid would people build up everything and then it would just end up being like really dull or unexciting at the very end, and how much of that can be said about being a grown up and an adult in the world too, you know?
Ugh. That's very true. Yeah, and I mean that last line, "mission accomplished," is like, I think that's what for me on a lyrical perspective kept me just hitting to go back, like listen to the song again. I was like,
Yeah.
mission accomplished. What
Yeah.
do you mean? And that's kind of what made me think that the victory referred to earlier is, again, sort of, or you know, the possibility of being freed from this fight is like, maybe it is another meta reference to the powers that be, but so much of the song's lyrics are more literal than that. But you know, I want to give Todd credit for whatever he was thinking at the time. You know, he's a very smart guy, and I love both of their lyrics so much. And this is one of those songs that I don't know if they both contributed lyrically, but their delivery, the switch off between those two makes the lyrics even more effective. So yeah, it's just one of my favorite songs from those guys.
I love it. Well, you know, Michael, I'm curious about your general takeaway of how and why this band matters to you, and what they do for, what they like do for you, and how they make you think about the world and inspire you just in general as a person who cares about the world.
Yeah, there are very few bands out there that kind of put their money where their mouth is, and I think Propagandhi has always been a symbol of like what you can do with conviction in music and what you can do with storytelling. Those aren't always the same thing, and you know, you can tell something very nonfiction, you can tell a very convincing and effective story, both can accomplish the same thing. They can both give the listener an epiphany. But I think that Propagandhi has this incredible ability and just this method of cooking up a song that matches the lyrics. And when you do that and you have this conviction and this drive underneath, whether it be the commitment to going cruelty free, or advancing all these progressive politics, they're all so important, and it adds this sort of third degree to the music that elevates it to the status, I think, of bands like Rage Against the Machine, or I'm sure I'll get a lot of shit for saying this, but just genuine storytellers like Bob Dylan and God, there's a lot of singer-songwriters, I guess you could list at this point, but that's an area I think that a lot of people get truth and inspiration from. And I think that sort of plateau that can be reached in that simplicity, Propagandhi can do with punk rock. And I prefer to get it through punk rock. So
I'm with you.
Yeah, I do love some acoustic stuff. I really enjoyed some of those alternative takes from the Propagandhi stuff in the Patreon.
Yeah.
But less talk, more rock is what I say.
Nice. Well, and I would be making a mistake if I didn't also mention that if you want to hear Chris, Jord, and Todd talk about this song specifically, and today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes more broadly, Chris made a Patreon episode with those two guys, which is really awesome because you get to hear Jord bust out his memories of all the things that he has locked up in his tour diaries and things like that. All of his calendar books. He busts things out of the shelves that people like us can never know. What goes into running the band. And so Jord is he busts out all of his files on that March of the Crabs episode. They did a Patreon. And then you hear Todd talk a little more specifically about the imagery within the song and the lyrics that he wrote about. So that's a pretty special episode as well, because all of them together is just always a good time. So, it's definitely go check out Chris's Patreon at patreon.com/JesusHChris and check out the March of the Crabs episode. They did a video version of it as well, so you can actually watch them talking to each other like a talk show. So that's kind of fun as well. So, Michael, I'm super thrilled that you made the cover for March of the Crabs and, took the time out of your holiday schedule to hang out with me and chat about it and tell me what you love about this band, about this particular song. And it's just been a real thrill hanging out with you today and getting to chat about Propagandhi with you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been a real pleasure. I really enjoy the show. I'm looking forward to hearing everything that comes next.
One last chance, we leave this place. We're all packing up and moving on. Got a war in the air. Thought our lives would pass as great events. A better prospect lies up ahead. Do you feel it in the air? We think touch beyond oblivion. Fighting a war that I can't win. Swelling with things we try to hide. Would never leave anyone behind. A harsh return that slaps you in the face. For one last chance, we leave this place. We're all packing up and moving on. I got a war in the head. Fear our lives won't pass this great event. A better prospect lies up ahead. Do you feel it in the air? With it crushed beyond oblivion. Falls in depth, walk hand in hand. Crypts and memorial walls hold my family name. Pills and bottles do the same. I hope that freedom's coming our way. The